We close out 2025 here on Birds and Nerds with a look at why nearly 100 million Americans are actively watching, feeding, or photographing birds, and how we can protect threatened bird populations. I've got the perfect nerd for this conversation, National Audubon Society CEO Elizabeth Gray, bird lover and scientist. Join us for a fun conversation around the joys and benefits of birdwatching and how you can be part of the mission to protect birds and their habitats by taking part in the Christmas bird count. I'm Ramona Schindelheim, and this is Birds and Nerds. Elizabeth, thank you for joining me on the Birds and Nerds podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation and the one, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the one we're going to have in Austin.
Same. I'm really looking forward to today. Thank you so much, Ramona, for having me on your podcast.
You know, the Birds and Nerds came out of this idea that birds are connected throughout our lives. And we've had some podcasts in before where we've talked about AI and we've talked about pencils, even pencils, and the connection to birds. And I wanted to make this podcast really about the bigger picture of birds connected to nature. There's a big trend in our country. People are enjoying birds more than they ever have. And I wanted you to give me a little bit of kind of an understanding of how many bird watchers do we have in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, it's incredible, truly. My understanding is we have 96 million self-identified bird lovers. So these are people who are either birders, hardcore birders, people who just enjoy watching birds behave. And that's an incredible number of people that care about birds. Incredible.
It's amazing to me. And these are, I saw those same numbers. I think they came from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
And these are people from all ages. Sometimes we get that kind of image of older people being the bird watchers, but these are teenagers. These are young adults. They live in the urban areas. They live in rural areas. I wonder if you've got any ideas on what might have sparked this new love of birds. Was it COVID? Do people just want to get out in nature again? Or has it been going on for a while?
I think it's an excellent question. And I love that you mentioned the fact that people of all ages are watching, because I do think some people have a preconception that birders are kind of older folks with binoculars that are really, nerdy, writing down every bird they see. But it's really a multi-generational movement. And I think Audubon has been really part of helping to make that happen. We have programs at our conservation centers where we have elementary school kids that are learning about birds, learning about nature, learning about conservation. We just hit our 100th Audubon campus chapter on colleges and universities, which is incredible. These are chapters kids that come together in college and form an Audubon chapter because they love birds, they love being outside, and then of course, internships, fellowships, and people who care about birds, and even folks that are just watching birds out their windows every day. It's a great question. Why the surge of interest in birding? I have a couple theories. I think, first of all, I find birds really magical, and I don't think I'm the only one. They're just beautiful. I mean, there's some birds I see and I think, how did that color scheme evolve on that bird?
I want to know that. I want to know that answer too for that same question.
Just absolutely brilliantly colored birds that take your breath away, frankly, when you see them or you watch them fly. You watch hummingbirds go forwards and backwards and sideways. So I think birds are magical. Who doesn't want a little magic in their life? I certainly love that. Birds are they're uniters. We know they fly huge distances. One of my favorite birds I love to talk about is the blackpoll warbler. This is a little warbler that weighs about the same as a ballpoint pen, frankly. And this little bird travels 1,800 miles over 3 days, twice a year. So I always think of birds as creatures that they don't know boundaries. They don't care about politics. They transcend geographic boundaries, political boundaries, ideological boundaries. And I think in a time where, frankly, there's so much division in the world and in our country, just the fact that you have something that can unite people, it brings people together, their love of birds, and I think they can transcend some of their differences to have a conversation about whatever, or have joy. And that, so I think the magic of birds, the fact that birds are unifiers, really helps. Birds are also, we have all these advances in technology. You can identify. When I started out birding, I had to use these big, heavy bird guides. So I see a bird, I, try to find the page where I could figure out what bird I was seeing. We now have apps on our phone where you can hear a bird and it can help you identify of course you can still use your bird guides, but you can use these apps, all these technological advances. We advances in AI where you can input information and it can help you identify what you're seeing or what you're hearing. So I think between the advent of technological advances, kind of the magical and beautiful quality of birds, the unifier. And then the last thing I'll say, Ramona, is I think of birds as a symbol of hope and optimism. And who doesn't want hope? Who doesn't want hope in their life? I I I love this story. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia along the Potomac River. And I just had this childhood dream of seeing a bald eagle in the wild. In DC, you see eagles everywhere. You see them on buildings. The eagles are kind of symbol of our nation. I had never seen a bald eagle. I actually had to end up going out west to see my first bald eagle in the wild. And I moved back to this area back in 2013. And I was frankly so surprised to see bald eagles along the Potomac River.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's incredible. And so I go on walks in my neighborhood. I'll have a bald eagle fly overhead. It's not anything I could have ever even imagined when I was a kid. And so they come back to places that are being restored. They can, we had the ban on DDT, the raptor population started to increase again. But there's stories, so many stories of hope and resilience. And so I think between all these qualities of what birds can add to your life, and also you can have bird feeders that have video cameras on them.
Yes. Another part of technology that has really helped make it more popular. Yeah.
You wouldn't believe how many people I run into that want to show me the pictures of the birds that they saw in their feeders that day. I just love that.
I actually interviewed the guy who created Bird Buddy at CES earlier this year. And he is a software engineer. And his reason for doing it is he grew up. I'm going to say it was Austria. Now, I don't remember for sure. But his dad was ran the national park. And he was just exposed to nature all the time. And he started thinking about, bringing other people close to nature. And he used his software skills to create that. And I know he's not the only one. And I know there's many different versions of it. But I love that because it does connect you to the outdoors if you cannot be there all the time, which I just find it, I think that's fantastic. And I also use my apps on my phone. The other day I heard some bird out I live in Los Angeles and I live in the city itself. I don't live out in the country. And I heard something out in the yard the other day. And so I went out and it turned out it was a swallow. But I was going, I don't think I had ever heard it quite like that, but I used the app on the phone so I could, there it was. I didn't see it, but I heard it. So
that's okay. That still counts.
It does count. And by the way, it's not just people going out, I think, and making that connection to nature. I wanted to point out, I've been a business journalist for a long time, and I read that according to Fish and Wildlife, it contributes $107 billion with a B to the economy because people travel, because they go out on these, I went to New York recently and I went on the walk through Central Park.
Fantastic.
To look at birds, saw like 4 or 5 that I had never seen before, which was very cool. And I lived in New York for a while. But people do it through travel and equipment, and it really has integrated into the economy, which I think is really good, but just our society in general, you know. And it does, I like your idea about it does connect people to each other as well. I always talk about that community idea.
It's a
So
real way to it's a real way to forge human connection, and you're right. The bird industry, the industry of bird lovers, it is a real economic driver for the United States. It's also an economic driver for increasingly for a lot of Latin American countries.
yeah, I know someone had told me they had gone on a trip to Costa Rica,
That's
I
right.
believe it was, to see the birds, which I thought, oh, I want to go on that trip now. You know?
You need to go on that trip. You need to go on that trip.
Well, that actually brings up a kind of a thought I was having about birds and their habitats. So we talk about Costa Rica, and they have the jungles that you can go through and see the birds. Here in the United States, there are efforts underway to protect different environments, and that is kind of the mission, really, at the heart of National Audubon Society, is protecting birds and their habitats. So while we look at them as, oh, look how beautiful this is and how awe-inspiring, there's a seriousness behind it that you guys really embrace. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So we're a conservation organization, and we've been around for 120 years. And our mission is to protect birds in the places they need today and tomorrow. That's our mission. And one of the really surprising things, well, I guess maybe one of the most shocking things I learned when I began at Audubon was that we've lost 3 billion birds since I was born. And that was so sobering to me. And so we have thought long and hard about what is our guiding star? What is our reason for being here at Audubon? And because of the decline of 3 billion birds over the last 50 years, we have decided to have as our guiding star this concept of bending the bird curve, which we call, the goal is to halt and ultimately reverse the decline of birds across the Americas. And we've made this really about the Americas because, as you said, like, we know that a lot of birds spend, let's say, 6 months of their lives in the United States, but they spend another 6 months of their lives either breeding up in Canada, wintering down in Latin America. And so birds, they traverse the Western Hemisphere, and so we need to protect the places that they need today and tomorrow, looking across the Americas. And so you're absolutely right. So our guiding star is to bend this bird curve. And so when I started, one of the tasks that I was given when I started as CEO of Audubon was to put in place a new strategic plan for the organization. And so we thought long and hard about, how do we start bending this bird curve? We came up with a strategic plan. We're about midway through it right now. We call it Flight Plan because we're Audubon. So we have to name our strategic plan, the Flight Plan. And we have several pillars that we're really working on that hopefully answer this question. One is habitat protection. So we are looking to create a corridor of connected, climate resilient habitat across the Americas, capturing both places where birds spend a long part of their life cycle of breeding or wintering, but also what we call these hotels and restaurants that they like to stop at as they make their journeys north and south every year. We're also looking at climate and trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because we know that climate is an accelerator of a lot of the threats that birds are experiencing. Building community is a big one. We touched on that at the beginning, talking about creating a multi-generational movement of people that are working to conserve our natural world. And then also policy, which is one of the best ways that we have durable, lasting results. And, we're nonpartisan. It's really important for us to maintain our nonpartisanship, and enables us to not only bring people together in a multi-generational community and movement of people that want to protect birds because they're symbols and sentinels of the natural world and really indicate how our planet is, where it's healthy and where it's perhaps under strain. but also because we know that we can use that power of birds. They're our superpower, frankly, is what we say at Audubon. Birds are a superpower, but they can bring lawmakers together to look for bipartisan solutions to, issues that are on top of mind for a lot of people.
The idea that it's a stunning number, almost 3 billion birds lost since 1970. And are you seeing any reversal in that trend through your efforts or, the joint community efforts?
It's a great question. The first thing I'll say, it's a long game. So we really adopted this idea of bending the bird curve 2 years ago. So I think it's a little early to say we're actually bending the bird curve yet right now. But what I will say, a couple of things. We have State of the Birds reports that come out every year. What's been really interesting to me is to look at how different groups of birds are responding to the pressures that we're putting on the natural world. So grassland birds are some of the birds that have been declining the most rapidly over time. We have seen increases in birds like water birds and wetland birds. So it really, you have to look at the group of bird and look at that. But we're making a lot of progress with Flight Plan. We've protected over 100 million acres since 2023. So we're making progress towards our goals and our strategic plan. And, my hope is in my lifetime, we can see that we are starting to bend this bird curve.
Is there anything that I, as an individual, can do to maybe help carry out this mission? What can individual people do?
Oh, so many things. I'll start. I'm a scientist, so I'll start with some of our community science efforts. I would love to make a plug for some of the community science efforts that we have here at Audubon that I'd love everybody who's listening to this podcast to take part in. So last year, we celebrated our 125th anniversary of a project that we call our Christmas bird count. And this is an effort where we have about 3 weeks in the winter. This year, it's going to be December 14th to January 5th. So everybody note that down in your calendars. I hope folks participate. This is a time where we have people who go out, and this actually is one of the largest and longest running community science projects in the world, literally. So we've been collecting data for 125 years. And this is all collected by everyday people. Everyday people. You don't have to be a birder. Go out, you're recording the birds that you see and you hear. We have a very large database, again, over a century of data that we've collected. And this is really important information because when you collect data for literally decades, you're able to really document and monitor trends, as you know, population trends over time. And so just a few years ago, we used the Christmas bird count data to look at how bird populations in the East had been affected by climate change specifically. That was the purpose of the study. And what we were able to demonstrate by looking literally over a century is that bird ranges have shifted in the East. Bird ranges have shifted, winter ranges, and habitat suitability, probably no surprise, has also changed. So that's one way people can get involved, is become a community scientist and help collect data, help lead to these long-term research projects and programs. We have another one called the Great Backyard Bird Count.
I've taken part in that one.
I love hearing that, Ramona. Thank you. It's another great opportunity for people to get involved. If you want to go out again because you participated in the Christmas bird count or you somehow missed it, it's in February. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure this year it's February 13th to 16th. So it's a much shorter window. It's 4 days. But you can go for the Christmas bird count. We actually have people do it in what we call circles. And so go to audubon.org and look up what the closest circle to you is if you want to do the Christmas bird count. The Great Backyard Bird Count is another community science effort. You just go wherever you want, go with a friend, go with a group of people. You're again recording what birds you see and hear. You upload them to a platform called eBird. What I'm guessing a lot of people listening to your podcast know have eBird on their phone. But that's another great effort. We had almost 1 million people participate last year in that over that 4 days. To me, that was incredible to have 1 million people collecting information and data on where birds are, what birds are where. We can document where they're moving, where they're, what habitat they're using, what habitat needs restoration, improved management. So the community science is a big piece of it, but that's not the only way people can be involved. People can, if you have a yard, you can plant native plants. We actually have a Plants for Birds program where you can go and find out what native plants are appropriate to your area where you live and plant some native plants. You'll bring in pollinators, you'll bring in different bird species. You were just saying you had swallow in your backyard the other day and you were, so you can plant gardens, but you can also use your voice. There are specific pieces of legislation that we're trying to advance that are really important. And so you can become a supporter of Audubon. You can become a financial supporter of Audubon. I would encourage anyone who's interested in supporting a great conservation organization to go to audubon.org and think about making a charitable contribution. That would be very meaningful to us. That's how we get our work done. Or you can use your voice to sign petitions and to really advocate for some of the different pieces of legislation that we're trying to work to advance in a nonpartisan way that are really important for the natural world. And one of the things I haven't said yet that I'd like to draw the connection between birds and people, because one of the things you'll often hear me say is that birds need the same things that people need. Birds need clean air, they need clean water, they need a healthy climate, and they need healthy food systems. And so this idea that birds are symbols and sentinels of the natural world, they really indicate where things are thriving, where, let's say, things are going okay, but they also indicate places that our natural systems are under strain. And so I deeply believe in my heart that if you do what's right for birds, you're also doing what's right for people. And so I do hope people think about different ways that they can become involved and engaged, whether it's through bird watching, engaging in as a community scientist, donating, becoming a member, becoming a supporter, planting native plants. There's just a myriad of ways. And guess what? Talk to your neighbors and your friends about the importance of birds and how they're really important indicators of the health of our planet.
I really love that idea, that using them, and to use a phrase, the canary in the coal mine. kind of the idea is that we can learn so much about our environment from them. And they also bring people that joy, that community and joy, which we've talked a lot about on this podcast in past episodes. I'm curious, what you say you mentioned you're a scientist. What attracted you? What led to your interest in birds on a personal level? I always love to hear what got people involved.
It may not be what you expect me to say. So when I was an undergraduate at Harvard, I learned that homing pigeons were used in World War II to carry messages. And I just thought, that is such a fascinating story that we had these birds that were flying through smoke and gunfire and carrying messages that literally save people's lives. And I became really fascinated with how did they know where to go and how did they know how to come back, where to come back. Truly. And so I ended up for my senior thesis studying homing pigeon navigation.
Oh, wow.
I was so fascinated in how homing pigeons navigate. There were lots of theories at this point. They use the moon, they use stars, they use landmarks, they have magnetic compasses. I mean, so I just thought this was a fascinating thing. So literally homing pigeons were how I became intrigued with birds initially. But birds have had this really fascinating arc in my life. So after that, I ended up deciding I wanted to get a PhD and go to graduate school. And I ended up studying blackbirds, marsh nesting blackbirds. And my project at first was to look at the interaction between red-winged and yellow-headed blackbirds. It was a long-term study. There are years and years and years of these two species sharing marshes out in the West in eastern Washington state. And I did my first field season. It was great. I was so excited. I loved being out in the field. And the next year, I went out to the field and the yellowheads did not return. And it was the first time we didn't have yellowheads on that marsh in a long, many, many, many years. And so that really prompted me to think about not just becoming an academic, but going into conservation and really trying to understand what was happening with the natural environment and why some species perhaps couldn't return to the habitat where they'd been breeding for literally decades. That journey led me to Hawaii, and I ended up studying endangered Hawaiian honey creepers. You may know about these. They're beautiful little birds that occur nowhere else in the world. And I was working on this species, and it was really the first introduction I had to climate change. This was 20 years ago. Nobody was talking about climate. It wasn't like today where we talk about this all the time. But what was happening is because there's so many microclimates there on these volcanoes and mountains, mosquitoes were increasing in elevation, and they were adding to the threats of these little birds. And so these honey creepers brought me to climate change. And I also got engaged to my husband on that Hawaii bird project. So
Yeah, very nice.
there's a personal connection I have to these beautiful Hawaiian honey creepers, and then a professional connection. And so kind of birds have intrigued me kind of just with how do they do that cool behavior of navigating, to bringing me to conservation, having me question what's going on with the natural world, to seeing the impacts of climate change and becoming really concerned about that and wanting to incorporate that into the work that I do. And then, of course, this offer to come and lead Audubon just felt like my life was coming full circle. And so, that's my story.
Excuse me. What I think is really cool is this episode. We're going to have this out here in December so we can talk about the Christmas bird count. But you are my first bird nerd and nerd. So, and I say it with great affection and respect too, because I love the story about the homing pigeons, because I have actually been very fascinated by them myself throughout my life. And who knows, maybe I read something you wrote, but I always thought I wanted to know how they could do all that. How could they be? How do they know to come back? How do they? I still find it fascinating to this day. And whenever I actually see something about people who have them, I actually stop and read it. Yeah, it's so great. And also, I wanted to ask you. You have a favorite bird, right? Everybody has a favorite bird. I think for me, I'm going to say mine is probably the cardinal, because it's what I saw when I was growing up. I grew up in Illinois. They were everywhere, and I know they're ubiquitous. I know they're in many different states and that, but I still think it's so beautiful. You talked about the coloring. That bird is so beautiful. The bright red male cardinal. So what is your favorite bird?
I have to say, Ramona, asking me what my favorite bird is, asking me which one of my two children is my favorite kid.
We won't tell.
Yeah. So I don't really have a favorite bird. I have birds that mean different things to me because of different parts of my life. I'm just as part of that story. I love the northern cardinal. I will say that's one of my favorite birds. But I will say, because we were mentioning this right before we started filming the podcast, there is a bird that I found to be so beautiful. I actually did live down in Costa Rica. I was not studying birds, but I had this blue-crowned motmot that would sit out on a branch outside my window when I was cooking breakfast every morning, when I was working as a field researcher. I was trying to decide if I wanted to go into biology for my profession. And every morning, this blue-crowned motmot will sit outside my window and is a male. They're incredible birds. They just the colors on them. They have these pintail feathers with a little bit of feather on the bottom of them. They're so striking. And so I would say, I don't have a favorite bird. I have different birds that kind of bring me joy or give me hope and resilience, like the bald eagle. But the blue-crowned motmot is one that takes my breath away. That's what I would say. It takes my breath away. Probably similar to how the northern cardinal takes your breath away.
Yeah. Again, it's that personal connection, and it meant something. And by the way, for those who haven't seen it, I'll have a picture in, if you're listening to the audio, you'll have to look it up yourself. But I will have a picture. I've got some pictures for this video. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous bird. And also, I looked up a little bit of its habits. It burrows. It doesn't build a nest on a tree. It burrows into the mud and creates. That's where it lays its eggs. It fledges its little babies, and it's fascinating. I had not known that about birds, that any of them did that. I am a amateur. I'm not a scientist. So I learned something new because you mentioned it. It was really pretty cool.
Wow, thank you. I mean, the bird behavior is like what drew me to science. They have incredible behavior.
Yeah. You can learn a lot from it. We've talked in previous podcasts about like the flocking together to protect each other. I'm going to make a little segue here, as they say in the business. You and I are going to be on stage together at South by Southwest in March. And we are going to talk about a lot more of this, what we could learn from watching birds. So I do think there's a connection to our lives in many different ways by their behavior and just the way they draw us together. But what we learn from them, I think, is very, very important on how they act as a group.
I agree. You have altruistic birds, cooperative breeders that help, unrelated birds that help each other raise their young. I could go on and on with cool stories about birds. Maybe we'll do that on this at Southwest.
Yeah, I think we will. And for those who can't be in Austin, I always record the podcasts that I do there, and then we'll release them a little bit later. So there'll be a part 2 of our conversation.
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for joining the podcast. That's my interview with Dr. Elizabeth Gray, CEO of the National Audubon Society. I'm Ramona Schindelheim. Thank you for listening.